Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mother and Refuge of the End Times. I'm joined today with a very special guest from the UK, from England, and his name is Jeff. You may, if you're a TikToker, if you follow TikTok videos on Catholic TikTok, you'll probably recognize Jeff. And Jeff has got his own TikTok channel, Harmony of Spirit, which is a very powerful and inspirational channel. So I've been trying to get Jeff on for a while to talk a little bit about his channel and about himself. So thanks for joining us, Jeff.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you for having me.
And I'm going to put your video up on the screen so that people can see your channel. That is, you've got almost 50,000 followers. You make
Yeah.
very short but inspirational reflections, and I really love it. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how your ministry on TikTok started?
Yes, certainly. Well, raised in England, middle of Devon, very rural upbringing. I was raised in the Church of England, the Anglican Church.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, went to church on Sundays, very traditional. Wouldn't say that I knew the Lord. I believed in God, but I didn't know him at that time. And things changed at the age of 33 for me when I fell ill with chronic illness, ME, or chronic fatigue syndrome, as it's sometimes known.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd always lived a good life, and I thought, why am I suffering like this, Lord? I grabbed my Bible that I was given when I was 9 years old, tried to find the answer to suffering, and I called upon my vicar. He had no clues for me. And I joined a prayer fellowship, which was specifically for the illness. And I met a Catholic lady, and she enlightened me about redemptive suffering. And she introduced me to Padre Pio, which was a very good job because I was to be bedbound for the next 13 years. And
Wow. Wow.
I must say that if it wasn't for Padre Pio, I don't know how it would have ended. You'll have to excuse me. I do get emotional when I speak about Padre Pio.
Yes.
He came
I
into
can
my
see that
life.
you've got a lot of videos about Padre Pio.
Yeah,
He's someone
I,
very
I,
special for you.
I just love him. I became his spiritual child at that time. I wrote away to the monastery, became a spiritual child. I had a number of dreams of Padre Pio. One of the most memorable was he was sitting in a chair, and I came up before him, and I knelt before him, and I was just full of love. And he offered me his hand, and I kissed his hand, the wound on his hand. And when I awoke, I was crying tears. I was just absolutely in tears. We began our conversion to the Catholic faith. I have to say, the main thing that drew me was the Eucharist and reading the early church fathers. But I would have to say it was the Blessed Virgin Mary who brought me in. My friend lent me a film, The Song of Bernadette, about the life of Saint Bernadette of Lourdes.
Mm.
And afterwards, I bought a commemorative plate. I saw a plate, and on the back of the plate it said, "Pray the Rosary, fast, and make sacrifices." Well, I knew what fasting was, and I knew what sacrifice might be, but what on earth was the Rosary? So I talked to the plate, the image of Our Lady on the plate. I said, "Mary, if you want me to pray the Rosary, you're going to have to let me know what it is." Well, the very next day, the vicar called from the Church of England
Yes.
to introduce, because we just moved into the area. And we're getting on this conversation, and halfway through the conversation, my eye glances at the plate, and I said, "You don't know what the Rosary is, do you?" And he said, "Well, yes." He said, "I do. As a matter of fact, I've got a copy of the prayers with me." And I thought, how
Wow.
coincidental is that?
And he's an Anglican
He's an
pastor.
Anglican,
Yeah.
and he knew the Rosary. He loved the Rosary, and he gave me the copy of the prayers. And I thought, Our Lady doesn't waste any time. Yeah, so I
Beautiful.
began to pray the Rosary and meditate on the mysteries, and that was it. Yeah, I was Catholic to the core ever since. And of course,
Wow.
reading the early church fathers was just amazing because being a Protestant, I'd visited several churches. I was originally married in a Methodist church.
Mm,
We'd visited evangelical churches and Baptist church, but one thing I found is that none of them could agree on anything.
mm,
And then I come to the Catholic Church, and not only is there a sound teaching agreed throughout the whole of the church, but it went back so far. I read the early church fathers, and I was amazed to see their belief in the Eucharist,
mm, mm,
and the likes of Saint Augustine and Tertullian and Ignatius, all these people teaching the same thing that the church teaches today. So that just had me hook, line, and sinker. Yeah.
powerful, powerful. Did you find any obstacles? I know that some Anglicans or Protestants that are trying to come into the church find Our Lady as an obstacle. That wasn't an obstacle for you, was it?
No. Do you know, it's a funny thing, but when I was an Anglican, um, the little church that we went to had a side altar and it had a statue of Our Lady. And I used to pray before that statue, and I just felt that she was my mother.
It's so
And when I
beautiful.
fell ill with the chronic fatigue, on the day I fell ill, I found that exact statue in a little flea market in the town where my wife was raised, and we were visiting. And I bought that statue and brought it
Mm,
home. And then my illness started. And it was incredible because it's like Mary was a mother to me right from the start. So I could never have doubts about the role of the Blessed Virgin Mary. You know, I could just feel her calling me all the time. Yeah, it was incredible. And
wow.
the ministry that I joined, the lady then retired and I took over the ministry. And we used to put out a monthly prayer sheet. And on the back, I would find stories of the saints and different things. I kept it ecumenical, but I did
Mm,
include Catholic stories and so on.
mm,
And I did that for 9 years. And it was just to the people that had ME, chronic fatigue. There was about 80 members. And it was those stories that I now use on the TikTok.
wow.
So
Yeah.
um, it's like God had prepared me. We kept everything all typed up. And, you know, I've got hundreds of stories of the saints and different things. And now I am well.
Thank
Um,
God.
I would say that my cure started with the Eucharist because I was actually confirmed in my bed. And
Mm,
the priest, uh, a lady from the church, first of all, came and did the RCIA with me. Then the priest came and confirmed me in my bed. I
mhm,
did kneel. I got out of bed and was able to kneel to receive Jesus for the first time. And
wow.
yeah, uh, it was at that point, after receiving the Eucharist, that a change happened in my illness. And I got well enough that I could then do a therapy. There was a therapy that I knew of. It was a 12-hour therapy. It was quite intensive. I wasn't well enough to do it previously, but I began to get well.
Mm.
And then being able to do the therapy, I became completely well. And yeah, so I don't know how I got into TikTok. I do not know how I got into TikTok.
Well, you've had a really powerful impact, and it reaches a lot of the young people as well, because a lot of the young people are on TikTok rather than YouTube.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's a very powerful ministry. Yeah.
I'm quite surprised that all you get is a name, sometimes a picture, but the picture can be a profile of a dog or a cat
Mm.
or something, and you don't know who's behind the
Yes.
profile, and
Yes.
and they speak to you, and they're quite intelligent in their speaking to you, and they're deep in their faith, and you think that you're talking to someone who's 50 or 60 years of age, and then they say, well, I've got to go to school now. I think, wow.
So
Yeah,
that's amazing, and I'm sure you get a lot of messages from people that are interested in or inquiring about the faith.
yeah, people are so kind that I've had some great feedback from TikTok. Yeah.
And the
But
impression that I got from watching your videos was that I felt very like a sense of calm, recollectedness, meditation. I love your meditations. They're very spiritual,
thank
and
you. Yeah.
you also have a very good connection with nature. Can you tell us about
Mm.
your connection, your spirituality?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Lord gave me so much when I was ill. I mean, when you're bedbound and you can't do a great deal, I couldn't even watch a great deal of telly because it affects the brain as well. Um, I wanted, the one thing that I found was that I had this fire within my heart and I wanted to share it. And so I wanted to pass it on to my children. There were points that I in my illness where I thought I wasn't going to make it. I thought I was going to die because I had terrible breathing as well, asthma,
Mm.
you name it, I had it. Um, and so I thought, how can I pass on my faith to my children? So I began to write, and I started to write poetry, very poor poetry, um, and then these meditations, and they would just come to me. I used to complain to the Lord because they'd always come to me during the night. So I would wake up in the night and the Lord would just give me this inspiration and I'd write it down. And I complained to him and I'd say, Lord,
Mm.
why couldn't you talk to me during the day? And he'd say, because you're always busy, you know. But yeah, but
It's beautiful.
and
Very beautiful.
nature, well, you know, we're surrounded by nature here in Devon. I'm very lucky. We've got the moors, we've got the beaches, we have everything, the forests here.
Oh, wow.
So always connected to nature. I've always
Looks
had a
beautiful
dog.
from what I've seen on your videos. It looks really beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. And some lovely history and churches and castles. You know, we have it all here in Devon. Yeah.
I'll have to come and visit one day, hopefully, God willing.
Yes. Well, you're welcome anytime.
So the channel for those that are interested in going and having a look is Harmony of Spirit on TikTok. This is one of your latest videos, and I wanted to talk about your a bit more about your connection with Padre Pio. You spoke a little bit about that in the beginning. Can you just emphasize that connection that you have with Padre Pio and
Yeah.
how he's spoken to you in your life?
Well, like I said, the first thing was to reveal to me that suffering was not a punishment from God. So many people, I've seen so many people in the Protestant world hurt by
Mm,
what churches tell them about suffering. I actually went to an evangelical church for healing once, and it was in London. I was put in the back of a taxi and sent there. I was in a wheelchair, and I met the bishop outside the church, and he looked at me and he said, "Oh, you're in a bit of a sorry state." And I said, "Yes." I said, "I've suffered this for a number of years now, you know." I said, "But it
mm,
has been a blessing because it's
mm.
brought the Lord to me." And he just looked at me and said, "It's not a blessing." He said, "It's a curse." And
Oh,
it just really hit my heart, you know. I thought, no, you can't say that. It's brought me to the Christ, you know. I'm here because of my illness. So anyway, I went into the church, and it was one of those staged healings that you see sometimes, where they get people up on stage, you know. And
mm.
um, well, the strange thing was, I had what I thought was a healing. I got up on my feet. I was well, but it just didn't last. As soon as I came away from the church, and this was a mystery I couldn't understand at the time. So I fell back into
What
the
church
illness.
was it? Was it an evangelical church?
Yeah, it was, well, a Pentecostal church.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I went back to that church later to say, look, it's worn off, you know, whatever happened.
Yeah.
Because I was early in my Christianity, so I didn't really understand, you know, suffering and so on, or the healing process.
Yes.
I went back, but they didn't want to know me. They put the video up of me being healed live on their YouTube, and I asked them to take it down because I said, "Look, it didn't work for some reason. You know what happened? isn't as it's portrayed. It's not correct. But I then found out from the congregation that people that were sick were shuffled to the back of the church, those that weren't healed, and they were frowned upon. You know, they didn't have enough faith to be made well. That was the
Wow.
message. Yeah.
Wow.
So
So interesting.
it made me think for a long time. I couldn't understand why God had allowed that to happen. But as I went on in my journey, I realized it was just to reveal the other side, really, to reveal what people are suffering. I had so many people come to me whenever I do a video about suffering and what I went through, people will very often message me and say, look, I'm in the evangelical church or this church or that church, and you know, that I've been told that I've not got enough faith and so on. And that's my first connection with Padre Pio, is that he taught me that suffering had value, it had redemptive value. I've always thought that my suffering was the catalyst to my faith. It took me out of the world. It made me focus on God. It made me rely on God, and it gave me great empathy for others who suffer. I was 20 years with ME in total, 13 of them bedbound, and I cannot resent one day that I suffered.
It's
You know,
amazing.
I look back, I was so ill. I can remember my wife sitting on the bed with me, holding my hand, and we had the telephone ready to phone for an ambulance because I thought I was going to stop breathing. And there were times that it was that desperate, but God's grace was always sufficient. His love, I can't explain it. It's just, he was so close to me. And there are times now when I miss that grace. You know, that when I became well and I got back out into the world, for a while, all you want to concentrate on is doing the things that you haven't done for so long. Drive a car, take the children to the park, and so on. And you kind of then focus on worldly things for a little while. And I began to miss God's grace so much that I almost wanted to be ill again. It was strange, but I realized that I didn't have to be ill to receive that grace. I just had to be close to God. And so I recentered myself, brought Christ to the forefront of my life again, and settled down. And that's when my TikTok came about.
It's a beautiful testimony. You have a great witness to share. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. We'll definitely love to have you on to chat with us more often in the future, if you're willing.
Yeah, sure, anytime.
Because you've got so much to share, and I'm just encourage everyone to go and have a look at your TikTok channel and have a look at all the beautiful stories. And we know that you have a very personal connection to these stories. It's not like it's an intellectual thing. You're talking from experience. You're talking from empathy as well. So it's very powerful.
One thing I found with Catholicism is you have a family. You have a family here on earth. You and I are brothers. We have a family in heaven, the saints, and they're our best friends, and they want to be in our lives. They want to help us. Yeah, I mean, Padre Pio, to me, he's the closest brother I have. He's just amazing. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Amen. Well, let's finish off for tonight. It's tonight my time, and morning your time in the UK. I'm not going to play the video. I'll put the link to the video on the description, the video description, and I'll get you to talk about what this video is about and do your own personal reflection before we finish.
Yeah, this is the story of a countess, Luisa Vieira, who here in England, she was an aristocrat, nobility. She went to see Padre Pio just out of curiosity, but ended up having a pang of conscience and went before him in the confessional. And he, being able to read hearts and minds, he displayed her life before her, almost in like a film reel. And she saw things that she'd even forgotten about her own life. And so she had this conversion. And then after coming out of the confessional, she decided to stay at San Giovanni Rotondo rather than return home immediately. And then she read in the newspaper that her son, he was away at war and his ship had sunk, and she thought he'd died. And she screamed out loud. And Padre Pio heard her scream. He came out of the church and he comforted her and told her that her son was okay. He knew because he had such a close link with our Lord that he would know things that were taking place around the world. And he also would use his guardian angels, of course, to convey messages to people and messages from the Lord and so on. And he could put her mind at ease. And then later, she discovered that it was as Padre Pio had said. And she even told him, he even told her where her son was. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thanks again, Jeff. And till next time, everyone, God bless you and hope to have you again in the future. Take care.
Thanks, Ron. God bless.